Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And September, as I said, is a lovely blend or a mix of different topics and wonderful women that I get to talk to. Last week, you heard from the flabulous, I was going to say hilarious, and I tried to say fabulous, Gab Bonesso from Pittsburgh, who I cannot wait to get to Scranton. She should be coming in April. She's a mental health advocate. She's super funny, super intelligent. I love talking with her. And this week, I get to talk with a friend of mine who has been on the show twice before, Julie Esty, who is a local historian in Scranton here, and who's also a friend of mine from the medical college. We get to play people with ailments, which is a lot of fun. You know, you name it. Pain during sex, kidney stones, gallbladder issues, you name it. We've had it all and we're still going strong. So please, I am happy to welcome this week, and you might hear her dog, Abby, who's a beautiful little rescue, and she's just a cutie pie in the background. And that's okay because she's hanging out by her mama there. So welcome, Julie Esty.
How's it going, Janine?
Just fabulous. And I should tell the folks on YouTube who go to watch it. Normally I have my guests here, but we did a little troubleshooting, but we're having trouble getting Julie on the video screen. So you will get to see photos from what we're going to be talking about today, but you won't get to see Julie today. I'm afraid we just had some technical issues. So I'm sorry about that for anybody who goes to YouTube, but you'll get to hear her lovely voice. So, Julie, we've talked before about it's that time of year. Well, I love fall, and I think you do too. And I see all the great creations. You're someone who crochets and you're very creative and crafty, and I love that. But you are busy right now getting ready for your annual Dunmore Cemetery Tour. And I can't believe it's been 2 years already that with the pandemic that you had it, but you did like a drive-through kind of thing. And this year you get to go back to what it started as, which is walking tours, right? The people who come out get to see this fabulous cemetery tour and get to walk along with the actors and see it. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So tell us a little, and I know we talked about this last year, the Dunmore Cemetery Tour, but I mean, I'm sure people are not like, computers that they remember everything. I know I don't. If you don't mind giving us a little bit of background, how long this is going on, how it got started, and then let's talk a little bit about this year's exciting cemetery tour.
Tours have been going on in Dunmore for well over 25 years. Many, many years ago, the Lackawanna Historical Society did a small walkthrough where they would look at the mausoleums. Then I came along. I was their first costume stop and did the tour with them for many years. And then when they changed formats and decided that they didn't want to do it anymore, they relinquished it to me. And that's when I found the Dearly Departed Players, which is a group of 14 people. And we go out there every year and we do monologues on a 1.5, 2-hour walking tour. So, it's kind of nice. This, I believe, is my 25th year of doing tours, somewhere thereabouts. And Nelson and some of the other players are now with me 17 years.
Wow.
So we're there a long time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think Carl Barbie too. He's a friend of mine, Carl. He's on part of your tour as well, right?
Carl has been with me, I believe, 17 years also.
Wow, that's something. Well, that says something to just how much fun and joy and that you guys must have with this. And I know I've seen it before. You guys are fabulous, very entertaining. And it's so basically just to let people know, this is something that you can do in the community in Dunmore for free. It's October 2nd and the 9th, and it starts at 2, but this draws a really big crowd. So you should get there early. And basically people who attend get to follow and walk through the cemetery. And about how many different like stories will they hear? How many different actors will they kind of get to see as they walk through the cemetery?
This year, they're going to get, I believe, 10 or 11.
Wow.
Coming off of a drive-through, off of the two, in years past, we have had as many as 17 stops.
Wow.
It was almost a 3-hour tour like Gilligan's Island. But coming off of, well, and I shouldn't say that we're coming off of COVID, but coming off of how we adapted for COVID and trying to get back to our usual format, we decided, and again, not knowing what's going to happen, because for all we know, something could blow up in the way of the pandemic again. We decided to get in, do the tour, and get out. You know, we're hoping for good weather. We're hoping that nobody gets sick. And you know, we went back to our roots of shorter monologues, a shorter walking tour. And, you know, we're kind of easing back into what we did before the pandemic.
Okay. And I could say I did it. Oh gosh, it's probably about 4 or 5 years, maybe even 6. I think it was about 5 years ago. It was one of those really hot October days, but I mean, everything was so entertaining. It's just like, it does not feel like a long endeavor, and you're walking. So I like to say to people, hey, you get out, if the weather's great, you get a nice little bit of exercise and you get to enjoy the arts and get entertained. So let me ask you, before I ask you about this year, tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, about because this is a great combination, I think, of not just local history in a way, but also theater. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in this. Is it your interest, love of history, love of local history? What drew you to this to begin with in the beginning?
When I was very little, my father brought me a book home one day after work called Mr. Lincoln Speaks at Gettysburg. And all these first and second grade kids are reading first and second grade books, and I'm reading Mr. Lincoln Speaks at Gettysburg. And that was my thing. After that, I just wanted to go there every year, as many times a year as I could. And I ended up doing that. And I started doing the living history thing, where I would see school. I started out with one Civil War dress. And as I said, I started out as LHS's, the Lackawanna Historical Society's first costumed stop. You know, so that's kind of, and before that, I was out there photographing because, you know, I did a lot of photography, and cemeteries are great places to work because if you make a mistake or you want to learn something, nobody's going anywhere. They're all staying in the same place. So you can go back and reshoot that mistake, you know, infinitely. So I was out there, and that's how I memorized the cemetery, from being out there photographing. And then when I decided to do the period dress thing, I ended up back out in the cemetery for a different reason, you know, with LHS and doing this annual tour. And what started out as one purple Civil War dress, and something that I never thought would be more than one purple Civil War dress, is now an attic full of costumes from 1860 to the late 1960s for a cast of 14 people.
Wow. Well, first off, Julie, I want to say I've never heard that perspective about making different, you know, photography mistakes, how like, you know, the captive audience, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
I love that.
I love that.
It's not like trying to photograph a child who's fidgeting. It's like, no, you can go back to the cemetery.
You know, they're the ultimate in postmortem photography out there. They're great. They're a bunch to work with. They don't go anywhere. They don't talk back. You know, so if you make a mistake, you go back. And two, I should say, even before I was photographing out there, I even though I went to Central, I used to go to all of Dunmore's football games. And, you know, that's way back in the 1970s. I used to sneak through the cemetery, because if I sneaked through the cemetery and weaseled my way into the football game and didn't have to pay the admission fee for the football game, I had money to buy cigarettes. Okay, it was like 75 cents. So I kind of feel as though like this is my way of making up for doing something that I shouldn't have been doing all those years ago. So I've been in that cemetery pretty much my whole life for one reason or another. Amazingly, never for a funeral.
Really? Huh?
Never.
Wow. Well, that's pretty interesting.
It's odd.
Why that cemetery? Is it just because the Lackawanna Historical Society was doing stuff there, or were you just located there? I have
no idea. I don't know how I ended up there. I don't know how I found it. It just seems like one day I just like beamed in and I haven't left. And that's it. I couldn't tell you how I got there. And then I have Megan, my daughter pretty much grew up there. So like that was, it's just been a lifelong thing.
Now, for those who, listen on a regular basis or semi-regular basis, I should mention that Megan was on the podcast over, I believe, the summer. She is a fantastic young woman who is working in New York City now with is it Metropolitan Opera House, right?
Yes.
And she is their shoe fitter. I don't know. That's the proper, yeah. Okay. But
she takes care of shoes.
She takes care of the shoes. And listen, I mean, that was a fabulous conversation with Megan, young woman who's, talked about what it's like living. She didn't like living in the city, but she enjoys her job, works in the city. And who would have thought that she'd be a shoe fitter? So for those kids out there who don't think there's a future in certain things, explore and just try things. And let me ask you, Julie, is it because of what she was exposed to with you with the costumes and things? Do you think that influenced her?
I think it did some. I actually think what really contributed to Megan going on in the arts was getting a bad ankle in dance, and a wonderful couple who work in theater, in lights and stage management, kind of took Megan under their wing when she hurt her ankle because she couldn't really perform that one year. And I think that's how Megan ended up being in the theater. It's sometimes things in your life just line up. It's just like me with the cemetery. Like it was just kind of dropped there. I don't know how it happened, but that's what my road was. Megan's was to, I think, to hurt that ankle so that she could take that avenue and explore something different. Like you just never know from one day to the next where you're going to end up. And sometimes we end up in some of the most interesting places, just like my dead folks.
And that's, that's an important reminder too, because, we're all different personality types, but like those folks who might be like, this is my life, this is how it has to be, except when things come our way, those little curveballs can sometimes lead us to something even better. So just, kind of after, granted, we may not always like what happened, but take a minute to see where it takes you. And sometimes it'll take you somewhere where you never imagined, but it turns out to be really fulfilling. So let's talk about, so now, okay, you've got all these items in your attic. And I know from talking to you, my gosh, you're so prolific, you're creative, you've got all these costumes. Is that a lot to manage? Like you've got all these different pieces of clothing and different items like through the years, like that's a lot, it seems like.
It is. And they are not like many costume shops, they are not in order and hanging on hangers or whatever. But over all of these years, it's gotten to the point where I can go up in that attic in the dark and open up a bin, and those bins change in their contents a few times a year, but I can tell by feel at this point, what I've got, who it's going to fit, what I can, and of course, every year more come along here or there. It's gotten to the point, like my attic used to be very cold because I don't turn the heat on up there in the winter. And now with the price hikes we're getting, where the heat's definitely not going on. But last winter I walked up in the attic and I thought, why is it so warm up here? It's not usually, usually it's freezing. And then I realized that all those costumes now and all those bins stacked from floor to ceiling are great insulation. There's everything up there. There's everything. And it's not just costumes for the cemetery. I mean, there are scarecrows, there are pirates, there are space aliens. Like I've got, actually, like I could probably go upstairs right now and do Georgie from Stephen King's It. Or, you have the yellow raincoat. If you don't want to be Georgie, you could be the Morton Salt girl with an umbrella. It's just like, the possibilities are endless. There are so many people in my attic, and I love them. I love all of them just as much as I love my whole crew in the cemetery, the living and the ones that have passed on. It's just an interesting group of people all around.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You say the things you say are like precious. I love that yellow raincoat, but I love that it's, you bring out something that, again, I'm always looking for the lesson in life, the adaptability. You could be Georgie from It, or you could be the Morton Salt. I love it. And I think your attic sounds like it could be like a Disney movie, which you've got scarecrows, you've got aliens, I mean, pirates. That's pretty wild. With an imagination, you're a hell of a lot of fun there.
The thing that I always say is my mother was not really big on Halloween. And of course you've got me, and Halloween was my favorite holiday. And then it kind of slacks off in junior high school and high school. But then when you get to be 21, you start to go to bars. And at that time, they used to have incredible costume contests. In fact, there were prizes that were given away that were like $1,000 for the best costume and stuff like that. And then, of course,
wow,
said you can't do that anymore. But so now you're looking forward to making a costume. And my mother was never all that jazzed up about costumes. And she was always like, why are you doing this? My thing is, you just don't know what a costume is going to do for a kid. Think about it. I mean, they get to put on these costumes every year. Like, I don't want to hear people saying that Halloween is not a good thing or whatever. Like, it's about being creative and going out there and having enough guts to put on something else. And that one mask and Cinderella costume can totally change some kid's life and put them in the arts. And that's a wonderful thing.
yeah. I am all with you there. And I love, even for adults, you get to play and be someone else and explore different parts of yourself. I used to love for maybe 10 years, I would do an annual Halloween party. It's been a while. And my one friend, now maybe she'll listen to the podcast because she only will listen when I give her a shout out, Kristen, we could not be more different. And I used to bust her ass because she was always like, do I have my hair stuck to my lip gloss? She was like super the pretty gal, worried about her calories. It took her like an hour to eat a Hershey Kiss. Meanwhile, I'm choking on 6 of them. She would always say to me, I would like to dress up as things that were scary. I was like a gothic Raggedy Ann, where I had that look where it looked like my mouth was sewn with black, the black thread kind of look. And I dyed a wig, so it was like grayish purple. I was scary stuff. I was a dead disco diva the one year, Death by Disco Ball, and I had like fake blood on it. And she would be like, don't you want to be something pretty? And I'm like, why? I could walk out the door and prettify any day of the year, but like for this, I want to be gory. I want to be something like bizarre. I love that idea of exploring and using your imagination, especially for kids, Julie. That's great.
Yeah. And because of a costume, think about it, it's led to so many wonderful things in the cemetery.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and the joy that people get too, to hear these, the stories and to see these really talented actors like yourself, like Carl, like Nelson, like the whole crew that you have there. It's really quite entertaining. How much would you say, whether this year and even in the years past, how much would you say of it, are there any stories that are like manufactured, or is this all based in some kernel of local history or different stories that were actually true?
99% of them are true.
Okay.
1% will often be a combination of multiple people who were here.
Okay. So this is really
sometimes, and how do I say it? While the truth is there and it is factual, I might not put their name out or their location because of, like, I have a murder suicide out there, a husband and a wife, and things did just what went horribly wrong there. And we've done that scene a number of times over the last 20 years so that we can address domestic abuse that I have never put their name out. And of course, over the last 20 years, I've put some lovely women out there who were working ladies. And usually the working ladies are a combination of a few of them that were here. And they are buried in the cemetery. There are working ladies in the Dunmore Cemetery.
Okay. So there is, it's the actual stories, history. It's just the names, as they say in the shows. The names have been changed to protect, the people's identity. Yeah, for some of them.
Not all of them.
Okay. But that makes sense. So how is it difficult finding these stories, like finding out, especially the ones that are really old stories? Is it hard to get the details of how they died and their different stories?
Working on the stories and the people in the cemetery is pretty much a 365-day-a-year job for me, because it's like a giant Easter egg hunt. I could have 20 people on my desk right now and say, I have got next year's tour. They're all new. They're all wonderful. They're all fabulous. I love them all. But you know what? By the time I go out to do that tour, I'm going to change those and look for new ones, because it's always the thrill of the hunt. It's my job to find that, like, many years ago, I stopped addressing the rich and famous because it's not just the rich and famous. This valley was built on everybody. Everybody has a story. Everybody made up this valley. And everybody has an interesting moment in their life. And it's my job to find that interesting moment and talk about it. And sometimes some of their really interesting moments are so relevant to what we have going on now. People think, oh, this never happened before, or blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? Everything that you think is new is not. It all happened before. Terrorist attacks, pandemics, we've had it.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I had a boss that I used to love. She was super smart, who'd say, like, for things that we did, she's like, none of us are reinventing the wheel. And I mean, truthfully, so much has happened. It's just now with social media, it's so much talked about, and maybe people, and myself included, I'll admit, I don't know. I'm not really big on history. I'm ignorant to a lot of things. So we may not realize the things that have happened before. So by even learning about it with these different stories, that's great to bring these different things to light. Are there any for this particular year coming up? Can you give us, and I don't want to ask too many things to give it away, but can you give us a hint of anything different or anything that you're excited about?
The tour this year addresses what we've all been through. And we've been through a lot. Over the last 2 years, we have been through a lot. We've been through a pandemic. We've had isolation. There have been a lot of things that were just not good. And I have assembled a cast from the past who well, one woman, well, now everybody is like, okay, you can go out in public and see an open air event. Well, I have one woman who was on committees for the Hollywood Bowl. It doesn't get any more open air than that, like so she's addressing open air. We've got people that address the pandemic of 1918. We have one man, and I absolutely love this guy. I mean, we all think we know isolation. Well, guess what? You don't know isolation till you're stationed in a weather station at the top of the world. That's it. He's in the Arctic. He was actually part of the Greeley expedition that went out to rescue a bunch of guys who, there again, more isolation. They got their boat got stranded out in the Arctic somewhere up there in the polar regions for I believe years. And wow. The expedition had to go and retrieve them. So we think we know isolation. You don't know isolation until you're living somewhere up there with a couple of people and there's nobody around. I mean, he comes back from his work doing that, and he works in different parts of the country, and he's a weatherman. So he talks about the isolation, and just when you think it is all gloom and doom, Elle comes along, and Elle, you know Elle, don't you?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Elle comes along, and Elle is just like this shining moment that, like, I feel like the dearly departed players are out there, and it's like, okay, here we are. This is what we had. This is what we had going on. This is where we are. And you know what? It's all going to be okay, because Elle comes out, and what Elle comes out with in this talk, it's just like, it's so comforting. So we're out there to tell people, you live in a good place. Be nice to people. Everything is going to be okay. Just hang in there. So that's one thing that we're all really happy about this year, is that these characters all gelled together to bring so much positivity. And of course, you have my bad boys, Nelson, Carl, and Roger. And they're taking off on everything that they can take off on, because we slip in some, well, I shouldn't say I slip in some things there that, we address, medical marijuana and Viagra and different things. We're doing it in a way that, if you're not paying attention, you got to pay attention, so we're addressing a lot of stuff. But of course, my bad boys are having all kinds of fun with that, so they're there to make people laugh too.
So we should say, in addition to learning something and reflecting, and maybe getting us to think about things differently, there's a variety of things they're going to feel. Serious stories, maybe some tragic stories, but they're going to laugh as well. So
they're going to laugh.
Okay,
yes.
That's great. That's great. And I love, you make a good point too about things have happened before. And, I know we can't help it because it's probably human nature to think that oh, this is the worst, nobody's been through what we've been through, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, unless, a lot of people who lost loved ones, I can't imagine, during the pandemic, that was very difficult. I was fortunate. Nobody that I'm close to was super sick or died or anything. But so for those of us who just had to deal with, let's say in the beginning, the quarantine, staying home. I mean, we're staying home, many of us with for me, I'll speak for myself, wine and binging Netflix, which really, is not that horrible at the end of the day. So compared to what people have been through 100 years ago or longer ago, they went through the real deal, stuff that we probably have no idea or can't even understand.
No, they don't have Netflix. They don't have TV. Many of them are desperately poor, so they have to go to work. And we do have pandemic victims out there at the back of the cemetery, so addressing them, addressing what went on, we had to do it, but of course we're doing it in dearly departed fashion, and you're going to laugh. One thing I am very proud of, I do have a woman, this is going to be a really nice moment. I do have a woman who's out there who is buried in the home of the friendless section, and her tombstone now is just a number. And I managed to figure out who she was. And again, here's another case. She's in Alaska. Her husband died and she's 50 years old. And this is back in the 1890s. And it's well, what am I going to do with my life now? Getting back to the whole which road life takes. She could have found somebody and gotten married again, but she decided, no, I'm not going to do that. This woman ends up in Kodiak, Alaska, working in an orphanage up there, teaching orphan children all kinds of skills to go on in life. And then, the road that leads her to Scranton, Pennsylvania is kind of an interesting, windy little thing. But she ends up passing away in the home of the friendless, and they bury her in the home of the friendless section with just a stone with a number on it. And I've identified her by name and what she did and when she died, but I also found a picture of her.
Oh, wow.
So that's a really cool moment for not just the people to see in the audience, but for that woman at the back of the home of the friendless section. You're not just a number anymore. We know who you are. We know who you look like. So we've got some cool moments. And of course, people are going to help decorate the cemetery. We're going to decorate it like we did, not as much as last year, but we are going to have some nice decorations, and folks at some wonderful organizations have stepped up to decorate. Space Time, Scranton Films, Carlucci Golden DeSantis Funeral Home. We've got some wonderful people that are going to decorate some mausoleums for us, which is cool.
That's awesome. So you get nice support in the community, which is great. And like I said, I know from years ago, people do come out for this. It's a really wonderful event. You mentioned, I'd like to transition, you mentioned Scranton Films. Let's talk for a minute about, there is a film that will be out before the cemetery tour. So September 30th, I think you told me, is the premiere of Julie and the Departed Players. Is that right?
Julie Departed Players. Yes.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what that is exactly. It's going to premiere September 30th, and I'll put all these details in the show notes so that people should be able to come out and see this. What prompted this? What is it? What's it all about?
Before the pandemic, a lovely woman, Luz Cabrales, came to me and wanted to start filming stuff going on in the cemetery. And I let her go. You know, Luz is a cool lady. It's like, okay, go ahead. Well, she ended up doing a documentary about how tours come together. And the way it landed was she really got rolling as the pandemic hit. So now here she is, and we've got a pandemic. And, you know, the film, this documentary, you know, addresses, you know, how long we've been there, who we are, you know, what we're doing in the cemetery. And then the pandemic hits. And as soon as you see 2020 flash on the screen, you know, something bad's going to happen, because 2020 was just a nightmare for everybody. But she shows the drive-through and how successful it was. And Luz ended up making this wonderful documentary about the cemetery tour. Such a positive thing. Like when you see how a community just pulled together to get out and help each other and go out and be a part of something in a time that was so bad for so many people. So Luz ended up doing this documentary, and she submitted it to film festivals all over the world. And it won awards all over the world. And we're going to be showing it here because it's never had a screening here. It's going to be shown here on Friday, September 30th at St. Lucy's Parish Hall in Scranton. And the doors for that will open at 6 o'clock. We're going to have a meet and greet, photographs. We're going to have some fun giveaways. At 7 o'clock, we're going to roll the film. I'm sure we're going to have popcorn and stuff like that. There is a $5 admission fee to get in to cover some of the expenses that she's got going on. But we're going to show that film. And it's amazing that, you know, the Dunmore Cemetery has been now been seen all over the world. In fact, one guy who walks the cemetery was interviewed for the documentary. And his buddy was sitting in a pub in England, and he looks up and he sees his friend who walks the cemetery. And it's like, wow, that's my friend. Like, I know him. Like, so here, this guy who's a Dunmore resident was being seen by his buddy on a television screen in a pub in England. We can't even imagine that we've traveled that far.
Wow. That's really cool. So would you say, is it like kind of a behind the scenes of what it takes for you to put your tour together, or is it?
It's everything. It's
everything.
The scenes. It's on the scene. It's while it's going on. It's the audience. They have captured everything, every part of it. There is absolutely gorgeous aerial footage in it. And I believe Luz did some of that, and Nelson did some of it with High Seas Aerial. But it's absolutely beautiful to watch this. And when you're down there and you're in it, you don't realize how big it is. And then Luz managed to get this aerial footage of the crowd. And when I looked at it, I was absolutely frightened. It's like, I can't believe that those crowds are that big. And the one thing that's really cool about those crowds is they all get along. Nobody fights. Everybody's cool. Everybody's happy. It's just a wonderful day in the cemetery.
That is awesome. Well, I will definitely put that in when I put the link for the podcast, so people check it out. So you have September 30th to see the documentary, and then October 2nd and 9th, the following, which is great. Sundays, you get to go out and actually see the cemetery that's being featured in the documentary. So that's really cool. What would you say to, so folks like you said you have a history there with the cemetery. For me, I've never, like, I used to go see my grandmother, visit her gravesite, and my grandparents. And a lot of people think cemeteries are scary places, which really, then there are people who go there and they think they're beautiful places. And I remember years ago, a young woman I was friends with who was an artist, and she would go there to kind of do sketchings and like of the names of the tombstones and things. And of course, back then we were like, well, that's strange. But honestly, it's really more of a serene, peaceful place, right? Would you say, I mean, what would you say to people who think it's just a scary place, or maybe they're afraid to be there at a certain time or whatever?
Well, my thinking is once you die, if, and I believe that there is something more and that you can't come back or whatever, if you can come back, why would you hang out there? Because you can go anywhere. So really, there's nothing to be afraid of in the cemetery. People say, have you seen ghosts out here? No, I only see angels. I've seen so many angels in that cemetery in so many different forms. It's not even funny. Wonderful, wonderful people. There's no reason to be afraid of the cemetery. And they are open air museums. They are community friendly spaces. You've got art, you've got nature and science. You can even have math out there if you want. I mean, take some kids out. Okay, go find some stones. Well, how old did this person live to be? You know, so there's just so many things. I mean, yeah, it's great to go out and do artwork and stuff like that, but that's not the only thing that you can do. And actually, we are a bit behind in the whole cemetery cultural thing, because there are cemeteries in other parts of the United States that have jazz festivals. They show movies, which eventually that is my goal. I would love to do that. I would love to have a screen out there, show a movie on the side of a mausoleum or something like that. I mean, but or like a jazz festival would be very cool. You know, we're actually kind of moving in that direction in little bits. But cemeteries are family-friendly, community-friendly, open-air museum. They're good spaces, and there's nothing there that anyone should be afraid of. We have had people over the years bring their grandchildren to see us when we're rehearsing, and they'll say that the kids are afraid to come in or they think they need to be invited. So we invite them in and we show them there's nothing to worry about out here. As my mother used to say, you don't have to worry about the dead. It's the living that you have to watch.
Yeah, that's a good point there. That's a good point. I love what you're saying about open air museum. I never really thought of it that way. So really, when you think about it, that could be a great opportunity for teachers or even parents trying to teach their kids a STEM lesson or a STEAM lesson. I mean, that's pretty cool. Or of course, a history lesson, it's a given, but that's a really neat concept. I never really looked at it that way.
It's actually the tour is site-specific promenade theater. Okay, we are showing these people in their environment because that's where they are now. They're all dead and buried in the cemetery, so we're showing them in their current location. And promenade theater, I guess, was popular in the Middle Ages, is it? When they used to put people and little scenes on the back of wagons and go through the town or whatever. So there's a couple interesting things going on with the Dunmore Cemetery Tour. It's not just go from stop to stop and hear a monologue. There's actually a little bit more to it than meets the eye. So you've got that going on. It's site-specific promenade theater.
Well, you're giving me things I have to research now, but that sounds very cool. I had never heard that before. That's cool.
That's what it is.
Very cool. So, and here's something I learned. I don't know if you have been hearing about this. So what you're talking about, the cemeteries are really beautiful places, and really people need to explore them and visit them more often. I was watching maybe a month or two ago, something on Netflix about the future of very different things, future of healthcare, future of this. And they were talking about the future of dying. And I mean, really strange, like different things with people, instead of being buried in a cemetery, of course, becoming a tree, or, people having these like virtual memorials where you could go somewhere and press like a button and watch a video of the person, their message they left behind. Really different things happening for the afterlife. Do you have any so I don't even know, will this continue to be the future with tombstones and things? Have you heard anything about that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Along with one of my cast members, Wendy Belaski, we do a funeral mourning history program that we've traveled with into different states. We probably have the largest collection of local funeral memorabilia in existence. And we do talk about old customs and the changes that are coming up. And there are a lot of very interesting ecological changes that are coming up in with funerals and stuff like that. There's a lot of different alternatives now for being buried. Like you can have yourself put into like a root ball kind of thing, and a tree will grow from that. People are getting into the wicker basket kind of thing because that's more of a biodegradable kind of thing. Of course, the Jewish folks have been doing a more nature-friendly thing forever because they're not, as a rule, using vaults and embalming fluids. The other changes that are coming about is we're seeing that before the 1950s, 1960s, you see more people dying at home. 75% of people died at home and their loved ones took care of them. We're starting to see people who are trying to get more into having their loved ones home and caring for them before they die. And then there's I've seen some cool people out in California who are doing the whole, I call them the toe pincher coffin kind of deal, but they put shelves in it and they use it for like their towels and stuff like that. Or there's patterns where you can make them and they're like these really cool bookshelves, but as soon as you need them, you take those books off and you put that all together. And now you've got your casket and you can be buried in something that's more eco-friendly. There's a water thing now too, where you can, I guess it just totally breaks down everything that you've got going on in the way of skin and bones or whatever. And really it is what we need to do. We don't really need to have all of these chemicals laying underneath the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess truly you want to remember your loved ones. You don't have to be in a certain place to do that, obviously. Yeah.
Right. It probably is going to take the fun out of it for genealogists who like to go out there and look for stones and stuff like that. But I think it is an option that we do need to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with the changing times, things do need to change. So
yeah. And you can remember people in other ways. You don't have to have that stone out there with that vault down in the ground that's loaded up with all kinds of chemicals and stuff like that. You know, you don't really have to have that to remember someone.
Yeah.
You know, so there are new advances coming along in the funeral industry. And I actually feel that they are very good changes for the environment.
Yeah. Well, that will be, yeah, I know. And I saw this Netflix thing. I was like blown away. I was like, wow, like things I had never imagined. I'm like,
oh yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do now. Yep. You can cremate it. You can have your body donated to science. I think that you can try and have your body donated to like a corpse farm. Have you ever seen one of those?
No.
They're for crime scenes.
Ah.
They will take bodies and they'll lay them out in different environments and stuff like that under different conditions. And they look at them after like X number of days and, you know, what kind of bugs have they attracted? What happened to them? And this way, when they get somebody, you know, that comes in as a crime victim or something like that, they learn from the ones that they've practiced on. You get what so there's a lot of different things that you can do now. Or, you know, for a fee, you can go in the ground and, you know, be buried next to somebody famous, not famous, whatever, and out in a regular cemetery.
Yeah. Well, that is really interesting. It truly is. And it's, of course, it's something now, you know, as I get older, it's on my mind. Of course, as my parents get older, it's that whole, like, you know, having conversations about this stuff. And yeah, so it gets to be more present or top of mind awareness, you know.
It's the final frontier.
The final frontier. You crack me up, Julie. Well, as we begin to wrap up here, is there anything else that I definitely want to share when I promote the podcast? September 30th, October 2nd and 9th, people in the Scranton Scranton area, Northeast PA, please come out. These are awesome things to see. Anything else that you wanted to say or bring up?
No, that's about it. Just come on out, join us. You'll have some laughs. You'll learn something. It's a nice walk in the cemetery, and you'll have fun. I always say, come out. You'll have fun. Get some fresh air. We've been in the house too long.
Yes, that is.
Try.
Yes, I agree.
We can't make the whole thing. We have people who come out. They do half the tour one week, and then the next week they come back and they catch the back end of it.
That's a great point. So someone that may not be able to walk as much, you can just split it into two. That's a great idea.
We had one woman the one year, she was absolutely great. She came out and she said, even if she only went like to the first 2 stops, she didn't care because she would go as far as she could go without a walker. And she was so happy that she was walking without the walker or whatever. So she's like, I'm going to go as far as I can. And next week I'll come back and I'll go a little further. And, so it's just a great day in the cemetery. There's been so many wonderful stories from so many people over the years. We look forward to seeing our audience again. And thank you so much for having me. I mean, gabbing with you is a thrill.
Well, I love gabbing with you anytime, on or off the air. So I know it's always a good time when I'm talking to you.
Someday we'll have to get together with some glasses of wine.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You don't have to twist my arm with that one. Definitely. But I love to promote not just women, but this area and the great rich history it does have. So anything that helps to support that and get people to learn something about this region, I'm all for it. So I think what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Julie Esty, the dearly departed, right? Did I get it right this time? The dearly
departed players.
Dearly departed players will be out there in the Dunmore Cemetery. So as I said, I will post the details in my show notes and also on social media as we get closer when this will air. And obviously, if I'm recording it and you're listening to it, it's aired. But of course, I'm recording it a little bit early. But anyway, you will be able to check it out. And if you're not right in Scranton, even if you're in Wilkes-Barre or surrounding areas, it's worth a little bit of a drive. So come on out and check it out. And thank you so much for listening. I will be having a couple more guests coming up. Will be related to history as well. Stephanie Longo will be a guest, and she's going to be talking about Italian heritage in the greater Scranton area. And I'll have a couple other folks who will be talking about some local things as well coming up in the next few weeks. So thank you so much as always for listening. I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass.